Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something incredibly complex, but also fundamental your body's defense system, immunity.
Absolutely. We're constantly exposed to, well, microbes and all sorts of foreign things.
Right, and instinctively we know our bodies fight back, but understanding how that fight works, that's crucial.
It really is. Immunity at its heart is just the ability to defend against pathogens, invaders, and keep things stable inside, homeostasis.
And problems arise when that system is off kilter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Illness often happens when these defenses are either suppressed, leading to infection, or sometimes, maybe even more interestingly, when they're overactive, that's where you get autoimmunity or allergies.
Okay, so our mission today, using our source material as a guide, is to give you a really clear picture of this whole system. We want to walk through the key parts, from the first barriers to the really smart memory cells.
Yeah, connecting the dots between the basic science and what you might actually see clinically.
We'll cover the two main arms. Innate, which is the fast, sort of general response, and adaptive, the slower, specific one.
And the big takeaway right up front, they aren't totally separate, they work together.
Right.
Critically, that fast innate system, it's actually needed to start the whole adaptive response. It gets the ball rolling.
Okay, let's dig into that connection then, the communication. If you have these two systems, how do they actually coordinate? How do they talk to each other across the body?
Well, it's mostly chemical signals. They use these things called soluble mediators, mainly cytokines and chemokines.
Cytokines, those are the messengers.
Pretty much. They're small proteins. They don't last long, but they're biologically active. They basically tell immune cells what to do: grow, move, fight, calm down.
So if they're the language, which ones are the, key words we need to know?
Good question. You should definitely know the big categories. Interleukins, or ILs, they mostly boost the adaptive side. Then interferons, IFNs, crucial for fighting viruses, especially IFN gamma.
And you mentioned TNF alpha earlier.
Yes, tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNFI. That one's a major player in causing inflammation systemically, like body-wide inflammation.
The sources mention cytokines have these two interesting properties, pleiotropism and redundancy. Sounds a bit contradictory.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually quite elegant. Pleiotropism means one cytokine can do different things to different cell types. So IL-17, for example, doesn't just act on immune cells, it affects skin cells too. Mess that up, and you see things like psoriasis or asthma.
Okay, so one molecule, many jobs. What about redundancy?
That's the backup plan. Redundancy means different cytokines can trigger the same function. So if one pathway is blocked for some reason, another cytokine can often step in and get the job done. It's a safety net.
Makes sense. Let's go back to TNFI. You said it's key for inflammation. What's the clinical connection there? How does it make you feel sick?
Right, this is where it clicks. Macrophages pump out TNFI when they detect pathogens using those toll-like receptors we'll mention later. And TNFI travels to your brain, specifically the hypothalamus, and tells it to crank up the thermostat.
Ah, so it's an endogenous pyogen. It causes fever from the inside.
Exactly. It's your body's own fever inducer. Now, too much TNFI for too long, that can be dangerous. In really severe situations, it can even cause blood clots throughout the body, intravascular coagulation.
Okay, so cytokines give the orders, but who tells the cells where to go?
That's the chemokines. Think of them as a subset of cytokines, but their main job is directing traffic. They create chemical trails, basically.
Like breadcrumbs for immune cells.
Precisely. Chemotaxis, leading leukocytes like neutrophils and monocytes right to the site of injury or infection. And there are different types. CC chemokines tend to attract monocytes, which you see more in chronic inflammation, while CXC chemokines pull in neutrophils, the stars of acute inflammation.
Got it. Let's shift gears then to that first line, innate immunity, the rapid responders. What protects us immediately?
Well, before you even get to cells, you have the barriers, physical and chemical. Your skin is huge, literally. Keratin, multiple layers, plus it's salty and acidic, and has enzymes like lysozyme. It's tough to get through.
And inside, like our airways or gut.
Those are mucosal linings. Tight sheets of epithelial cells, special cells, making mucus, that sticky stuff that traps microbes, and then tiny hairs called cilia that sweep it all out. Think coughing, sneezing.
Plus chemical defenses.
Yep. Lysozyme, again, in tears and saliva, and these little antimicrobial peptides called defensins that poke holes in bacterial membranes. And we can't forget the complement system floating in the blood, ready to go.
Okay, barriers down. Now, who are the actual cells, the sort of foot soldiers of this innate response?
Key players are the phagocyte cells that eat things. First up, Neutrophils, or PMNs. They're the most numerous white blood cells, usually just chilling in the blood or bone marrow until they get that chemokine signal. They're the early arrivals.
Any others?
Then you have monocytes. They circulate for a bit, but then move into tissues and transform into macrophages. These guys are long-lived, really effective eaters, crucial for cleaning up debris and sustained fighting. Very versatile cells.
But who does the intel? Who connects this initial fight to the more specific later response?
That would be the dendritic cells, or DCs. These are specialized cells often found right at the body's surfaces, skin, gut lining. Their job is to capture invaders, process them, and then this is key travel to lymph nodes to present pieces of the invader to the T cells. They're the crucial bridge to adaptive immunity.
So they're antigen-presenting cells, APCs.
Exactly. Macrophages can do it too, but DCs are really the pros. And we also have natural killer, or NK cells. Bit of an oddball. They come from the same line as adaptive lymphocytes, but they act innately.
How so?
They can kill certain targets, like virus-infected cells or tumor cells, without needing to have seen them before. Spontaneously. No prior sensitization needed.
Which brings up a really important point. If these innate cells haven't seen the specific bad guy before, how do they know what to attack and what to leave alone?
Great question. They don't recognize specific individuals. They look for broad patterns. They have pattern recognition receptors, PRRs.
And these PRRs look for...
They look for pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PMPs. These are molecular structures like specific sugars, lipids, or proteins that are common on microbes but not found on our own human cells. It's like looking for a generic non-self badge.
So it's a general danger signal detector?
Exactly. And the most famous type of PRR are the toll-like receptors, TLRs. When a TLR binds its specific PMP, that triggers intracellular signals that really kickstart the whole inflammatory and antimicrobial response.
Okay, so we have barriers, innate cells recognizing general patterns. What about those soluble weapons you mentioned earlier, opsonins and complement?
Right. Sometimes microbes are slippery, hard for phagocytes to grab onto, partly because of electrical charge. Opsonins are molecules that fix that. They coat the microbe. The process is called opsonization.
Like putting handles on it.
That's a perfect analogy. It makes it much easier for phagocytes to recognize and bind. Examples include some acute phase proteins made by the liver, like C-reactive protein, CRP, and mannose-binding lectin, MBL. And importantly, antibodies from the adaptive system also act as opsonins.
And the complement system. Sounds dramatic.
It is. It's a cascade, like dominoes falling. About 20 proteins normally floating inactive in your blood. When activated, and there are a few ways to start it, it leads to 3 main outcomes.
Which are?
1, more opsonization. 2, boosting inflammation. And 3, directly killing the pathogen by lysis, basically, making it explode.
Explode? How does that work?
So the different starting pathways, called classical, lectin, and alternative, they all end up activating a key protein called C3. Splitting C3 is the crucial step.
Okay.
It makes C3b, which is a powerful opsonin itself, sticking to microbes. And it makes smaller fragments, C3a and C5a, which is potent inflammation triggers. They make mast cells release histamine, increasing blood flow and making vessels leaky, bringing more help.
And the exploding part.
That's the final stage. It forms something called the membrane attack complex, or MAC. It's made of complement proteins C5b through C9, and they assemble into a ring that literally punches a hole right through the microbial cell membrane. Water rushes in, and pop. Cell bursts.
Wow. Okay, that's a powerful innate weapon. Let's move to the second line, the adaptive immunity. Slower, but specific, and it has memory. What gets this system going?
This system responds to specific molecules called antigens, or sometimes immunogens. These are usually large molecules like proteins or complex sugars that the body recognizes as foreign.
Does the immune cell see the whole giant molecule?
No, that's a key point. Antigens have specific little regions on them that are actually recognized by the immune cells, by B cells and T cells. These recognizable bits are called epitopes, or antigenic determinants.
So one bug could have many different epitopes.
Exactly, which is why you can get a very diverse immune response to a single infection. Oh, and related to this are apins.
Haptens.
Yeah, these are small molecules like penicillin or the oil from poison ivy. On their own, they're too small to trigger an immune response. But if they attach to one of our own body proteins, that complex can become antigenic and trigger, say, an allergic reaction.
Interesting. Now, for this specific recognition, especially by T cells, we need to talk about MHC molecules, major histocompatibility complex. What's the deal with MHC-I versus MHC-2?
Right. MHC is absolutely central for T cells telling self from non-self. They code for proteins called HLAs, human leukocyte antigens, which are like your tissue type.
And the two classes have different jobs.
Totally different roles based on where they are. MHC class I is found on basically all cells in your body that have a nucleus, almost every cell,
Okay, ubiquitous. Why?
because its job is to display fragments of proteins made inside that cell. It's constantly showing snippets of internal happenings on the cell surface. If a cell is infected with a virus, or if it's become cancerous, it displays abnormal fragments via MHCI.
Signaling trouble from within. And who sees that signal?
The CD8 plus cytotoxic T cells. They monitor MHCI on all cells. If they see a foreign or danger signal there, they know that cell needs to be eliminated.
Okay, and MHC class 2.
MHC class II is much more restricted. You only find it on specialized antigen-presenting cells, or APCs, primarily those dendritic cells we mentioned, plus macrophages and B cells.
And what do they display?
They display fragments of things they've captured from outside the cell stuff they've engulfed and broken down. They take bits of bacteria or viruses they've eaten and present them via MHC2
To signal an external threat. And who sees that signal?
The CD4 plus helper T cells. This is that crucial link again. The APCs pick up danger via innate mechanisms, process the antigen, and show it on MHCC2 to the helper T cells, essentially saying, hey, look what I found. We need to launch a specific adaptive response against this.
Got it. So MHCI is what's wrong inside me for CD8 cells, and MHCI is look what I caught outside for CD4 cells.
That's a perfect summary. Now, this adaptive response splits into two main branches.
Humoral and cellular.
Correct. Humoral immunity is run by B lymphocytes. When activated, they differentiate into plasma cells, which are essentially antibody factories.
And antibodies are the main weapon here.
Yes. They float around in the body fluids, the humors, hence the name. This branch is primarily for dealing with threats outside of cells. Bacteria floating in the blood, viruses before they infect a cell, toxins.
And these antibodies, the immunoglobulins or IgGs, they have different types.
They do. Structurally, an antibody looks kind of like a Y.
Yeah.
The top arms, the Fab region, are what bind to the specific antigen epitope. The stem, the FC region, determines the antibody's class and function, what it does after binding.
Can you give us the highlights of the main classes?
Sure. IgG is the most abundant in blood, lasts a long time, and importantly, it can cross the placenta, giving passive immunity to newborns. IgA is the secretory antibody found in mucus, tears, saliva, breast milk, protecting mucosal surfaces. IgM is usually the first one made in an initial response. It's large and very good at activating that complement system we talked about.
Okay, GAM, what about E?
IgE. This one binds very tightly to mast cells. It's famous for its role in allergic reactions, causing histamine release. It's also thought to be important in fighting parasitic worms.
And the memory aspect, that's key for vaccines, right?
Absolutely. The first time you encounter an antigen, or get a vaccine, the B cell response, the primary response, is slow, takes maybe 1-2 weeks, and you make mostly IgM first. But you also generate memory B cells. The second time you see that same antigen, maybe years later, or with a booster shot, those memory cells kick in super fast and hard. That's the secondary response, much quicker, much stronger, mostly IgG. That's vaccine protection.
Okay, that's humoral for extracellular threats. What about cellular immunity and the T cells?
T cells handle the threats inside our cells, viruses that have already infected a cell, or cancer cells. Remember, they mature in the thymus and undergo rigorous selection there.
Thymic selection.
Yeah, it's like boot camp. They have to learn to recognize MHC, but crucially, not react to MHC-presenting normal self-peptides. Only the ones that pass this test, showing self-tolerance, are allowed to survive and circulate.
Makes sense. So what are the main types of T cells doing the work?
We've touched on them. First, the helper T cells, carrying the CD4 marker. They're the master regulators, the generals. When they get activated by an APC, showing them an antigen on MHCI, they release cytokines like IL-2, IFN-gamma, that orchestrate almost everything else. They tell B cells to make antibodies, they boost cytotoxic T cells, they activate macrophages.
So CD4 cells are central command.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they can differentiate further, like into T1H cells that promote the cellular response, or T2H cells that favor the humoral and allergic responses.
Okay, helpers help. Who does the killing?
That's the cytotoxic T cells, the CD8 plus cells. Remember, they monitor MHCI on all our nucleated cells. If they detect a sign of internal infection or transformation presented on MHCI, they activate and directly kill that compromised cell.
How do they kill it?
Usually by triggering apoptosis programmed cell death or by releasing enzymes that punch holes in it. Very direct, very effective. Essential for clearing viral infections and keeping cancer in check.
So we have helpers and killers. Is there anything to, like, put the brakes on?
Yes. Very important. The regulatory T cells, often called Tregs, they're another subset, usually also CD4 plus TREG, and their job is to suppress the immune response. They help shut things down once the threat is cleared, prevent excessive inflammation, and critically maintain tolerance to self-antigens, preventing autoimmune disease. They're the peacekeepers.
Okay, that covers the main players. Where does all this happen? Where are these cells made and where do they hang out? The lymphoid organs?
Right, you have the central lymphoid organs. That's the bone marrow, where all blood cells, including lymphocytes, are initially produced. And the thymus gland, located behind your sternum, which is specifically where T cells mature and get educated.
I heard the thymus shrinks as you get older.
It does, quite significantly after puberty. But don't worry, you maintain a pool of T cells, and some residual production continues.
So that's production and maturation. Where do they actually encounter antigens and launch the response?
Those are the peripheral lymphoid organs. Think of them as meeting places or surveillance posts. This includes lymph nodes, filtering lymph fluid draining from tissues, the spleen filtering the blood itself, and MALT, or mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues, patches of immune cells guarding surfaces like your gut and airways. Think tonsils, Peyer's patches. Antigens get concentrated in these spots, making it easier for lymphocytes to find them.
Makes sense. Let's quickly touch on how we acquire immunity, active versus passive.
Active immunity is when your own body mounts the immune response. This happens either through getting sick naturally or through vaccination. The key result is immunological memory, which is usually long-lasting protection.
And passive.
Passive immunity is when you receive pre-made antibodies from somewhere else. The classic example is a baby getting IgG antibodies from its mother across the placenta before birth, or IgA through breast milk. It provides immediate but temporary protection because the baby isn't making the antibodies itself and they eventually degrade. Usually lasts maybe 3 to 6 months.
Okay, clear distinction. Finally, let's bring this home clinically. How does aging affect this whole complex system?
It's a really important area. Unfortunately, the immune system generally declines with age, sometimes called immunosenescence.
What kinds of changes do we see?
Several things. That thymus shrinkage means reduced T cell production. Existing T cells might not respond as well. There's often decreased production of key cytokines, like IL-2, which is needed for T cell proliferation. Both innate and adaptive systems can become less efficient.
And the consequences?
Well, it makes older adults more susceptible to infections, they don't respond as strongly to vaccines, and paradoxically, they also have a higher risk of developing cancer and autoimmune disorders, possibly because that regulatory control, like Tregs, also weakens.
So tying back to TNFs and fever.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because their overall inflammatory response might be blunted, an older person could have a serious infection but not mount a strong fever. So you can't rely on fever alone to rule out infection in the elderly. Their baseline response is just different.
That's a critical clinical point. Okay, let's try to wrap this up.
Sure. So, the big picture. A highly integrated defense system. You've got the innate side fast, uses general pattern recognition, and the adaptive side slower, incredibly specific, learns, remembers. They talk constantly using cytokines and chemokines. It all revolves around APCs presenting antigens and B and T lymphocytes carrying out the specific attack and building memory.
So for you, the learner, connecting this to reality, think about when you feel really sick. That general malaise, the muscle aches, the chills, maybe a fever spiking. You now know that a lot of that initial feeling is often driven by the rapid release of those inflammatory cytokines, like TNF, from your innate system sounding the first alarm.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the pathogen itself causing all those initial symptoms, or even the slower adaptive response kicking in yet. It's often the immediate, powerful reaction of your first line of defense.
Which leads to a fascinating thought.
Right. How much of what we experience as being sick, especially early on, is actually just the collateral effect of our own potent, immediate immune defenses doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Something to definitely think about as you apply this knowledge.
A great point to end on. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.